I want to create a world in which my son is proud of what we do. I hope we don't go back to some of the practices in the past that, Harry and I had to grow up in.
Had to endure suicide is a lot of unanswered questions. We go through all the basics of recycling and making sure we minimise water use and turning off lights when you leave the house and stuff like that.
I will continue on with a life of public service, so I will always support the charities and the people that mean so much to me.
The palace has broken its silence, and what they've revealed about Prince William has shaken the nation to its core. After weeks of hushed concern and restless whispers, Buckingham Palace has confirmed the news no one wanted to believe. The official statement dropped like thunder across the quiet of Britain, sparking heartbreak, disbelief, and a tidal wave of speculation around the world. Something terrible had happened, something the crown could no longer hide. Tonight, we uncover the truth behind the most emotional royal revelation in decades. The night before everything changed. Windsor was frozen in an unnatural calm, the kind of stillness that feels like the moment before a storm breaks. The lamps along the courtyard flickered faintly as Prince William slipped out through a side entrance, collar turned up, face carved in stone. To the casual eye, it looked like a man taking a midnight walk. But those who knew him best recognized that quiet, because silence, in the royal world, always means trouble. Inside the palace, a handful of aides caught sight of him leaving. None dared to speak. He said not to wait up, one murmured, her voice trembling despite herself. They'd seen that distant look before, the look that always came before a decision that changed everything. Upstairs, his study lay in quiet ruin, papers scattered, old photos torn from albums, a single notebook bearing the royal crest left open on the desk. The ink was still wet, proof he'd been writing just moments before vanishing into the night. Meanwhile, at Adelaide Cottage, the Princess of Wales sat in the half-light of an untouched room. The children slept upstairs, dreaming innocent dreams as the world outside trembled. A forgotten cup of tea had gone cold beside her. Kate's eyes rested on an old photograph, William laughing in the early days of their marriage, before duty replaced simplicity. She brushed her thumb over his face and whispered into the emptiness, "Please, just come home safe." Outside, the wind began to howl through the trees, carrying the faint hum of something unspoken. The moon hid behind a veil of clouds as William's car sliced through the fog-drenched countryside. His reflection in the window looked older, more burdened than ever before. The driver said nothing. He'd learned long ago that royal silence carries its own language. After a long, heavy pause, the future king exhaled, his voice barely audible above the hum of the engine. "It has to be done," he said, and the darkness swallowed the rest. No one inside the palace knew exactly what was happening, only that something irreversible had begun. For weeks, whispers had circled the gilded halls, that Prince William was preparing to break centuries of tradition once his father's health began to fail. A new reign meant a reckoning, and insiders claimed William's vision for the crown was nothing short of revolutionary. He wanted to strip away the spectacle, cut the excess, and rebuild the monarchy as a symbol of service rather than privilege. But change in that world comes with blood, not applause. By midnight, Windsor's corridors stood in eerie stillness. Only 2 aides remained, loyal enough or foolish enough to wait. The elder, a man who had served 3 generations of kings, sighed into the silence. "He's been carrying something heavy," he murmured. "And when the weight finally breaks him, God help the rest of us." The younger aide swallowed hard. "He never talks about it." "That's what terrifies me," the old man whispered, glancing toward the grand staircase. "When he stops talking, it means the choice is already made." Back at Adelaide Cottage, Kate rose from her chair and drifted toward the window. Outside, the garden shimmered under a silver moon. The roses William planted that summer were now brittle stems, bowing in the wind. Her reflection looked ghost-like in the glass, eyes hollow, skin pale, lips trembling around a lie she kept repeating to herself. "He always comes home," she whispered. But even she didn't believe it tonight. Hours later, just before dawn, headlights appeared through the fog. The car eased through the gates. William stepped out, his face carved by exhaustion and dawn's first fragile light. He nodded once to the guards and walked inside. The waiting aides stood at attention. "Your Royal Highness," one began carefully, "is everything all right?" William paused too long. His eyes seemed distant, shadowed by thoughts he could never share. "It's been a long night," he said quietly. "Get some rest." Then he turned and disappeared down the marble corridor, his footsteps echoing like a clock running out of time. Inside his study, the fire had died to cold ash. The air smelled of rain and fading smoke. William sat again at his desk, reopening the notebook he'd left behind. His eyes skimmed the page, his own handwriting, a blueprint for a crown reborn. A king's duty isn't comfort, it's sacrifice. And soon, the world would learn what sacrifice truly meant. He set the pen down, pressed his palms to his temples, and leaned back as fatigue consumed him. Outside, dawn crept over the palace like a secret it didn't want to tell. By sunrise, servants moved in hushed rhythm, avoiding eye contact. The tension was tangible, like static before lightning. At Windsor, Kate's phone buzzed. One message from the palace. Her breath caught before she even read it. The fairy tale was over. Duty had claimed its debt. And somewhere between the misty roads of that night and the first blush of morning, the future King of England had made a decision that would fracture the monarchy forever. The world still slept, unaware that history had just shifted, that the crown itself now rested in unsteady hands. Outside Buckingham Palace, the air turned heavy again. Reporters gathered, lenses fogged, voices hushed. Even the birds kept their distance, as if nature itself sensed what was about to unfold. The morning the palace fell silent. When the clock struck 9, the great doors of Buckingham Palace creaked open. A royal spokesperson emerged, pale, tight-lipped, clutching a folded sheet of paper as though it carried the weight of the world. Every murmur outside vanished. Camera shutters went still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. When the voice finally came, it was steady, but heavy with grief that could not be disguised. On behalf of His Majesty the King and the entire royal family, the spokesperson began softly, "It is with deep regret that we confirm. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, is facing a serious health challenge." The words cut through the crowd like a cold wind through glass. Reporters froze mid-motion. A young journalist gasped, "Oh God, no," before covering her mouth. The rest stood in stunned silence as the ancient palace loomed behind the spokesperson like a monument in mourning. The statement was short, clinical, yet devastating. The prince was receiving the best possible care, surrounded by family. But the phrase that echoed most was, "The king is deeply concerned." 2 words that every royal watcher knew were code for fear. This wasn't precaution. This was crisis. Within minutes, London was a city suspended in disbelief. Screens in cafes, subways, and shop windows all blazed the same headline: Prince William faces serious health battle. Commuters stopped mid-stride, reading it twice as if the second glance might soften the blow. A florist near the mall whispered, "Not William, he's the strong one." A taxi driver shook his head, voice thick. That family's seen enough heartbreak. Inside the palace, the air had changed. Laughter was gone. Every corridor seemed dimmer, every conversation reduced to whispers. In his private study, King Charles sat hunched at his desk, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. The gray morning light spilled over him, revealing a father's face, tired, haunted, but unbroken. Beside him, Queen Camilla placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "He's always been our strength," she said softly. "Now he needs ours." The king didn't answer at first. His eyes drifted to the rain on the window pane. Finally, he murmured, "He'll fight it. He's my son. He always fights." Outside, the first flowers appeared, small at first, then waves of color pressing against the iron gates. Notes tucked between roses read, "Stay strong, William. Britain stands with you." Strangers prayed. Some cried openly. Others simply stared toward the palace, searching for a glimpse, a light, a sign. The rain came and didn't stop. Still, no one left. By afternoon, every global network had gone live. Anchors spoke cautiously, voices quivering despite their training. The king's concern, one noted gravely, suggests this is far from routine. Around the world, headlines blurred into one collective heartbeat of fear. Inside, the palace remained dim. Princess and Prince Edward, even Andrew arrived quietly through side entrances. Whatever the past, blood had called them home. As evening fell, the sky turned gold over the palace gates, the rain fading into mist. Crowds lingered long past dark, unwilling to go, united in a silent vigil that wrapped the heart of London in grief. For years, the world had seen William as the unshakable center of the monarchy, steady, composed, untouchable. But that image had shattered. Now, behind the walls of power, stood a man stripped of armor. A son, a husband, a father, fragile, human, mortal. And as the last light in the palace windows flickered out, Britain realized a truth it had long ignored. Even in the grandest halls, hearts still break. Even under the weight of crowns, fear still trembles. That night, across a rain-soaked nation, prayers rose for the future king. For his strength. For his survival. For the crown that suddenly felt so fragile. What happened behind those guarded walls after the announcement remains a mystery. But history remembers that night by one name, the night the crown fell silent. The hours after the palace statement dragged on like a lifetime. London's skies hung low, gray and unyielding, pressing down on Buckingham Palace like a secret too heavy to bear. The air itself seemed afraid to move. Inside those centuries-old walls, the royal family drifted through corridors like ghosts, each lost in their own quiet war between fear, love, and helplessness. The official lines still echoed through every room, carved into the silence. His Royal Highness is facing a serious health challenge. So few words. Yet they thundered across the kingdom with the weight of 1,000 church bells. At Clarence House, King Charles sat alone in his study, a cold cup of tea untouched beside him. Outside, autumn leaves fell slowly through the garden, like golden fragments of time slipping away. He'd faced politics, scandal, the weight of the crown. But nothing prepared him for this, the one thing no king could command or conquer, the fear of losing a child. Camilla entered softly, her footsteps barely a whisper. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her hand found his shoulder, a gesture of quiet strength amid the chaos. "You should rest," she murmured, her voice trembling between love and dread. Charles didn't look away from the darkened window. "How can a father rest," he said quietly, "when his son suffers?" For once, he wasn't speaking as a monarch. He was speaking as a father, stripped bare by love, powerless against fate. Camilla's fingers tightened gently. "He's stronger than you think," she said. A small, tired smile tugged at Charles's lips. He always was. Far from the palace, at Windsor, the Princess of Wales sat in the children's nursery. The room smelled of lavender and storybooks, the faint hum of lullabies still lingering in the air. George leaned against her shoulder, his small voice cracking as he asked, "Mummy, is Papa really sick?" Charlotte sat cross-legged on the rug, silent but wide-eyed. Little Louis clung to Kate's arm, refusing to let go. The television was off, but the images haunted her, the gates buried in flowers, the crowds waiting, praying. She forced a smile she didn't feel. "Papa's going to be fine," she whispered softly. "He just needs to rest." They nodded, pretending to believe her. And when they finally fell asleep, she stayed there in the quiet glow, hands trembling as she brushed their hair from their faces. When the tears finally came, they came without sound. For that moment, she wasn't the Princess of Wales. She was just a woman in love, terrified that love might not be enough. Across the ocean in Montecito, Prince Harry sat alone, the glow of the TV flickering across his face. The broadcast looped the same line over and over. The Prince of Wales is facing a serious health challenge. Each repetition cut deeper. His phone lay on the table, William's name shining faintly on the screen. He reached for it, thumb hovering over the call button, but stopped. Meghan appeared in the doorway, her voice soft. "You should call him." Harry exhaled. "I don't even know what to say." She stepped closer. "Then don't think. Just speak from your heart." But he didn't. He couldn't. Too many miles. Too many wounds. The silence between brothers had grown into an ocean, and tonight, it felt endless. For the first time in years, none of it mattered: the fame, the press, the broken ties. He wasn't a prince tonight. He was a son, a brother, a man praying for family. Back in London, the palace windows glowed faintly against the rain. King Charles and Camilla walked the garden paths slowly, their hands intertwined. The gravel crunched softly beneath their feet. The air smelled of roses and wet earth, fragile reminders that life, no matter how royal, could bend and break just the same. In that silence, no titles existed. No cameras. No crowns. Just hearts beating in fear of what the dawn might bring. Camilla's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "The country loves him," she whispered. Charles gave a slow nod, voice cracking under the weight of helpless truth. "Yes," he said softly. "But tonight, I am not their king. I am only a father praying for his son." At Windsor, Kate sat by her children once more, calm on the surface though her pulse trembled beneath. She brushed a hand through George's hair, her voice a whisper against the quiet. "Everything's going to be all right," she said, half promise, half prayer. Across the ocean, Harry stood by his window, phone still in hand, unable to press the call that could bridge years of silence. Outside, California's stars flickered faintly, but even they seemed dim tonight. All across Britain, from cottage windows glowing with candlelight to London's rain-streaked streets, the country held its breath as one. It wasn't prayers for a crown this time, or a title, but for a man. A son. A father. A husband. No matter how bright the jewels or grand the palaces, a single truth hung in the October air, beneath the gold and glory. They were simply a family, fragile and human, waiting for dawn to offer mercy. But within those silent palace walls, something else waited too. An unseen tension. A secret ready to fracture the calm. The crown's quiet heartbeat had begun to change. Under a pale London sky, Buckingham Palace stood motionless. But anyone close enough could feel it, the stillness before revelation. Inside, time no longer moved at its usual royal rhythm. It slowed, pulsed, and breathed with memory. Gone was the hum of ceremony. What lingered instead was something softer, raw humanity. Those who walked the marble corridors that morning said they could sense it, the presence of a man who had carried the heart of the monarchy with grace, and now left behind a silence that felt almost sacred. Prince William had always understood duty, but to him, it was never about privilege. It was about service. From the first days watching his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, he learned that real power was quiet, measured, and kind. And from his mother, Diana, came the truest lesson of all. It's not the crown that defines you, it's the heart that wears it. Those words shaped him. When he joined the RAF, flying rescue missions across the British Isles, he didn't do it for glory. He wanted to matter, to be useful beyond the marble gates. His fellow officers used to say they'd forget who he was entirely, until the moment he took off his helmet and the future king stood among them, humble, exhausted, real. Through every storm, Kate remained his anchor. Their bond wasn't built on spectacle, but quiet strength, the kind that shows in the glances that need no words. And when George, Charlotte, and Louis arrived, William found something he'd never expected: peace. But that peace came with a price. Every smile had to be calculated, every silence analyzed. He lived beneath a crown that demanded perfection while stealing away the freedom to simply be. Sometimes, late at night, he would wander the gardens of Kensington Palace alone, the city lights shimmering beyond the gates, wondering if duty had cost him more than it gave. When King Charles took the throne in 2022, William's world shifted again. More responsibility, more eyes watching. He carried it all with quiet grace, guarding his father from pressure, shielding his family from noise. He was the still point in a kingdom of storms. Those closest to him called it the invisible weight, the burden of being both heir and human. He wanted his children to laugh without cameras, to live without fear. But deep down, he knew that was a dream carved from hope, not reality. Once, when George asked softly, "Why do you have to go again, Papa?" William knelt, smiled gently, and said, "Because it's my job to help people." Simple words, yet they became his creed. His advocacy for mental health revealed the part of him people loved most, his empathy. He didn't preach, he listened. He stood beside veterans, held grieving hands, and reminded a weary nation that even princes break inside sometimes. But those who truly knew him saw the toll. The sleepless nights, the quiet stares, the way his thoughts sometimes drifted into places too far to reach. Still, he never faltered. "He's our steady one," an aide once said. "When everything else shakes, he holds." So when the heartbreaking news came, when the nation fell silent in disbelief, it wasn't just a man they mourned, it was the embodiment of everything he had given. The palace gates overflowed with flowers. Strangers wept openly. Charles sat by the window, his hand trembling as Camilla stood beside him. Kate held her children close, her tears falling quietly into their hair. And across the sea, Harry watched the coverage alone, his heart heavy with what might never be repaired. For a single, fragile moment, Britain stopped breathing. Because Prince William was never just the heir, he was the bridge between the old world and the new, between duty and emotion, between the monarchy's steel and the people's heart. He carried Diana's compassion, Elizabeth's endurance, and Charles's discipline, all bound by a heart that refused to stop caring. And as the sun slipped behind the palace that night, one truth lingered in the hush that followed. Behind every title and every portrait, there beats a heart that bleeds like any other. But imagine, if that silence carried more than grief. What if it hid something the palace never meant for the world to hear? Because sometimes, even in the calmest moments, history holds its breath just before it shatters. The day Britain fell silent. Across Britain, something unexplainable took hold of the land. A silence so thick it seemed to hum through empty streets and echo across the fog-draped fields. From the misty cliffs of Scotland to the rain-soaked cobblestones of Windsor, one truth hung heavy in the air. This was no ordinary loss. It wasn't just the passing of a prince. It was the fading of a man whose quiet grace had stitched the nation together. By dawn, the news had spread like a chill wind. By noon, the world itself felt altered. Radios traded morning talk for soft hymns. Shops delayed their openings. Children bowed their heads in classrooms while church bells tolled faintly in the distance. On every screen glowed the same image, the royal flag, sinking slowly against a sky the color of sorrow. Outside Buckingham Palace, grief became visible. Flowers multiplied by the hour, from a few white lilies to a sea of colors stretching across the gates. Letters, rain-soaked and trembling, clung to the iron rails like final goodbyes. An elderly woman pressed a small card into the mound of roses. Her voice cracked. "He was one of us," she whispered. "Kind, humble, real. We'll never see another like him." Those around her said nothing. They just nodded, eyes glistening beneath gray skies. In Windsor, candlelight flickered through fog-streaked glass. Families stood in doorways, heads bowed, as church bells rolled like distant thunder. Even the royal guard seemed carved from stone, unmoving, yet visibly human beneath the weight of loss. In Manchester, a group of veterans gathered by a war memorial, their medals catching what little light remained. One man removed his cap and pressed it to his chest. "He understood us," he murmured. "Didn't matter who you were, he made you feel seen." At a London hospital, Nurse Claire arrived from her night shift, exhaustion hidden behind tears. She laid a white rose near the gates. "He came to our ward once," she whispered. "Made everyone laugh. He cared. You could feel it." In a Norfolk schoolyard, children formed a circle around a framed photo. Paper crowns and daisy chains surrounded it. A little girl placed her drawing beneath it, a family holding hands. "He told me to be brave," she said softly. "So I'm trying." Tributes flooded in from leaders and celebrities alike, but it was the ordinary voices that mattered most. A farmer in Wales spoke quietly to a reporter. "He listened," he said. That's all he did. But somehow that was enough. By evening, the entire country breathed as one. Inside Westminster Abbey, the air trembled with candlelight and prayer. The organ's deep notes echoed against ancient stone as hundreds wept in reverent silence. Outside, rain fell steadily, soaking the mountain of flowers now blanketing the palace gates. Ink blurred, but one message remained beneath every smudge: love, gratitude, loss. When Big Ben struck 9, its chime rolled through London like a farewell heartbeat. The sound drifted over the Thames, through narrow alleys, across rooftops, then vanished into stillness. In pubs, cafes, and living rooms, people spoke in hushed tones, afraid to disturb the sacred quiet. Screens replayed moments that now felt too tender to bear: his laughter, his hand on a child's shoulder, his words that once steadied a nation. Nothing rehearsed, nothing royal, just real. By midnight, London was shrouded in peace. Candles burned low. The rain had stopped. And for one fragile night, Britain, so often divided, stood united by grief and grace. People began to realize something profound. True greatness doesn't live in crowns or carriages. It lives in compassion, in the quiet acts that outlast applause. His life had been proof that gentleness is not weakness, that leadership is love. And though his voice had gone still, his presence lingered. In every child's laughter, in every tear turned into prayer, in the fragile unity of a nation that, for one sacred night, felt like family. When the morning came, sunlight broke through the gray at last. And in that golden light, Britain understood it had lost more than a prince. It had lost its heart. A man who made the crown feel human. A legacy that would never fade. When the heartbeat behind the crown falls silent, what remains? Let's step into the stillness that followed, the quiet strength of Catherine. The palace remained wrapped in that unearthly calm. Outside, cameras waited. Inside, the world felt smaller, fragile, and utterly changed. Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood by the window as dawn brushed the gardens in pale gold. She didn't break. She didn't weep. Her calm was her armor, but behind her steady gaze lived a storm. This wasn't about duty anymore. This was love. The headlines screamed across every screen, but behind the walls of Windsor, silence spoke louder. Catherine moved quietly, careful not to wake the children. A framed photograph of William rested on the table. His smile was frozen mid-laugh. She touched it softly. "We'll be all right," she whispered. It was a promise to him and to the nation watching through its tears. When George, Charlotte, and Louis woke, their questions came like whispers. "Is Papa okay?" Charlotte asked. Catherine smiled faintly, her voice steady though her heart wasn't. "Papa's resting," she said. "He's been strong for everyone. Now we have to be strong for him." She'd seen the exhaustion long before anyone else, the sleepless nights, the faraway look, the way he carried his pain in silence. He always said, "I'm fine, darling. Just work." But she knew the truth. The weight of a crown not yet his had already begun to crush him. In the days that followed, Catherine became the calm at the center of chaos. She met with advisors, comforted staff, guided her children with quiet grace. The cameras caught her walking hand in hand with them, poised, composed, luminous through sorrow. But when night came, she knelt alone in the small chapel, the candlelight trembling around her. Her prayers weren't for rain or legacy, only for peace, for healing, for time. To the world, she was a princess. But in truth, she was a woman fighting to keep her family from breaking. Her silence became strength, a reminder that even in grief, love endures. And as long as she stood steady, hope lived on. Perhaps that hope was building towards something no one saw coming. Let's move into the night that changed everything, the king's voice in the silence. That evening, the palace lights glowed dimly, like candles in mourning. Then, suddenly, televisions flickered to life. King Charles appeared on screen, composed, yet fragile in the way only a father can be. He wasn't speaking as monarch, but as a man undone by love. "My beloved son," he began, voice quivering, "has shown courage beyond measure." It wasn't a royal address, it was a confession. Across Britain, in homes, hospitals, and quiet pubs, people leaned closer. His tone carried the weight of every father who had ever feared the unthinkable. He spoke of faith, resilience, and the family's gratitude to a nation united in sorrow. Though we face uncertain days, he said, we will face them together, with love, with grace, and with faith. A single tear escaped down his cheek. He didn't hide it. For once, the crown wasn't a wall. It was a bridge. William has given everything to this country, he continued. And even in his silence, he gives us something greater, unity. When the address ended, he looked straight into the camera, eyes glassy yet steady. In darkness, he whispered, "We must remember the light." My son has given us all. The screen faded to black. No fanfare, no anthem, just silence and a nation quietly breaking. But in that silence, something stirred. For the first time, the crown didn't feel distant. It felt human. And maybe, in the quiet between grief and grace, Britain found not just sorrow, but hope.